We are looking at what is, without a doubt, one of the most dangerous geopolitical standoffs on the entire planet. For decades, the United States, Israel, and Iran have been locked in this really complex stance of hostility. And the whole world is just watching, wondering if one wrong move could set the entire region and maybe even the globe on fire.
And that really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? If this tinderbox finally ignites, does the fire stay put? Or does it trigger a chain reaction that has consequences for everyone? The stakes really could not be higher, so getting a handle on the dynamics here is absolutely crucial.
So here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll look at the standoff itself, then dig into the core issues and check out who's on what side. After that, we'll explore how a war could actually kick off, what the price tag would be, and finally, ask the big question, can this be avoided at all?
Right, so this is not something that just popped up yesterday. The hostility between these three countries has been simmering for decades. It's a long, complicated story full of revolution, changing alliances, and some really deep-seated mistrust that has brought all of them right to the edge of open war.
Okay, so what's really feeding this fire? Well, it pretty much boils down to two huge connected issues that define the whole thing. First up is Iran's nuclear program. That's a massive point of disagreement. And second, you've got Iran's growing influence across the Middle East, which its rivals see as a direct threat to their own security.
You know, to really get a grip on the tension today, we've got to rewind a bit. The big turning point was 1979. The Iranian Revolution created an Islamic republic that was fundamentally hostile to the U.S. Fast forward to 2015, and we saw a little glimmer of hope with the Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA. But that all fell apart in 2018 when the U.S. pulled out, and that's when tensions just went through the roof again.
And this really gets to the heart of the nuclear fight. Iran's official line has always been, hey, our nuclear program is for peaceful energy. But for the U.S., and especially for Israel, a nuclear-capable Iran isn't just a problem. It's seen as a grave security threat, an existential risk they feel they simply cannot allow. There's just no real middle ground there.
Now, let's talk about that other piece of the puzzle. Influence. Iran has a very particular way of projecting power. It's often not through its own army, but through something called proxy groups. These are basically militias that aren't officially part of Iran's military, but Iran supports them with cash, weapons, and training. It lets them fight their battles without starting a direct state-on-state war.
Iran calls this network its resistance axis, a front that it claims is pushing back against U.S. and Israeli influence. The key players here are groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon, sitting right on Israel's northern border, Shiite militias in Iraq, which are a threat to U.S. forces there, and Hamas in Gaza. Now, from the U.S. and Israeli point of view, these aren't just independent actors. They're seen as extensions of Iran's own military, pointed right at them.
So, with these battle lines so clearly drawn, let's actually compare the two sides. What are their strengths? What are their strategies? Who are their friends?
And when you look at their military strategies, it's like night and day. On one side, you have the U.S.-Israel alliance. It's built on super advanced technology, things like the Iron Dome, and just overwhelming conventional firepower. On the other side, Iran relies on its massive military, a huge arsenal of missiles, and what experts call asymmetric tactics, things like cyber warfare and those proxy forces to counter a stronger enemy. It's a classic matchup of high-tech versus high numbers and clever strategy.
Okay, so all the players are in position, and tensions are at a fever pitch. How does this actually explode into a real, full-scale war? Let's look at the sparks that could light this very short fuse.
Most experts see three main ways this could go down. First, a preemptive Israeli strike on Iran's nuclear sites. If Israel decides time is up, that would almost certainly lead to a massive retaliation. Second, a conflict at sea. Iran has threatened to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, a place that is critical for global oil. Any move to do that would trigger a huge military response from the U.S. And third, a massive cyber attack. If either side hits critical infrastructure, we're talking power grids, financial systems, that could easily be seen as an act of war.
And if any of those sparks fly, the explosion would be immediate and just staggering. The cost of this kind of conflict would send shockwaves that go far, far beyond the Middle East.
Let's be perfectly clear about this. There is no version of this where a war between these powers is small or somehow contained. It would be catastrophic, not just for the region, for the entire world.
So what would that fallout look like? Well, first, a horrific humanitarian crisis. Massive civilian casualties, people forced from their homes, destroyed cities.
Economically, if that Strait of Hormuz gets blocked, global oil supplies would seize up, sending prices at the pumps soaring and potentially triggering a global recession. And strategically, the conflict would almost definitely spill over, dragging the whole region into a much wider, longer war.
So this brings us to the final and most important question. With the stakes this high, is there any way out? Can this war actually be avoided, or is the pull towards conflict just too strong to stop?
Right now, it feels like the situation is being pulled in two opposite directions at once. On one side, you have the international community calling for calm, for diplomacy, maybe even to get that nuclear deal back on track. But on the other side, the things pushing toward war are really powerful. Iran's nuclear program keeps advancing, the proxy attacks continue, and those deep-seated rivalries are only getting more intense.
And here's the crucial point. Most analysts believe a direct, all-out war is still avoidable. Why? Because neither side really wants one. But, and this is the truly terrifying part, the risk of a miscalculation, of one side reading the other side wrong or overreacting to something small, that risk remains dangerously high.
And that leaves us with one final, very unsettling thought to chew on. In a tinderbox this crowded, with this many sparks flying around, is a mistake, a miscalculation, not just possible, but maybe, eventually, inevitable? That's the question that's hanging over everything.